So everybody's asking how this works. Obviously on the Q45 swap, you can't fit an air compressor. There's no room for it down in here. Even less so with the supercharger setup, at least where my alternator is. It's not in the factory location. It's actually where the air compressor would go. So I did the proof of concept. It works. Unfortunately, I had a leak in my evaporator, which is the only part of the car, the AC system that's actually part of the car. Everything else is custom. I ran hard lines. I didn't want to have the compressor and everything in the front of the car. Cooling this car tends to be somewhat of a challenge as it is. The intercooler's probably way too thick for what I'm doing with it, but it'll run, a little warm on the highway, and I didn't want to have to deal with another thing in front of the radiator. So I ran hard lines under the car. It was very challenging. If you know the header clearance on this car, it's very, very difficult to get things along the frame rail. I ended up having to run the return fuel line through the tunnel, and I'll show you the hard lines underneath and how it crosses over. Obviously the evaporator is missing now. I'm trying to get another one. I converted everything to standard American thread because the Nissan threads are, it's just too hard to find that stuff. So everything was converted. Unfortunately, that means the evaporator has fittings that are non-standard welded onto it. But that's what it is. System probably takes about 2.5 cans of Freon. The factory, I think, is 25 ounces, which is just a little over 2 cans. I was able to get a can and a half in there before the evaporator started leaking. The pressures were good, 30 on the low, about 150 on the high side, and it was already cooling down to about 50 degrees. I think it would have actually gotten a lot better with the other can of Freon in there. But I'll show you now the bottom of the car. So the lines actually run along the frame rail here. I insulated them with insulate. You see where the fuel line comes across. Everything's insulated with heat shielding, and there's nut zerts in the chassis to bolt everything into. The hard lines actually finish right here. Everything's, it's bolted in. This one I still have to attach. And it goes through the frame rail. Comes out here to the side next to the subframe bracket. And then it will run out along the tire wall. There you see the dryer. This is the pressure switch. Try to have somewhat of a safety system on it, so in case it, you see everything's tucked out of the way. Obviously the car's wide body, but eventually I'm gonna get rid of that and go back to OEM sheet metal. But even with the 315s, 295s, actually what I have on there now, it won't rub. Everything is in there. Everything's behind the shock. So the closest it actually comes to is right about here, and there's about a 2-inch space here between the lines there. And then moving out the back of the car, this is where we have our condenser core. There's a spall fan under there, cooling the condenser. We'll see how it runs. Like I said, it cooled pretty well, even sitting here, idling. That spall fan is it's the medium one, which is it's a pusher, so it's I think it's like a 1500 CFM fan. It's probably overkill, but it's better, I guess, since it's in a bad spot to have more cooling rather than less. You see where the fittings actually bulkhead into the trunk band there. You see that battery cable that runs over to the other side. We'll get to there in a minute. And here is the compressor. It's a Chinese special, electric. See, everything goes in there. So this actually is part of my chassis harness. So I run for a long time I had a painless harness in this car, but when I started trying to bring it back to stock a few years ago. I didn't want the engine bay harness in the car. So this is just the engine bay fuse box equivalent area. Everything is just custom back here. Under dash, everything is the same as the factory. So, you know, I had an extra spot. I had already always planned to do this at some point. I had an extra spot here for that's why I ran such a heavy duty cable, because this thing pulls like, I think it's 30 amps at low speed, 40 amps at mid speed, and it's something like 50-60 amps at high speed. I only ran it at the medium and the low speed, and even at the medium speed, it was, you know, like I said, it was cooling in real well. So as I get it back running, it'll we'll see where it goes, and where we might actually end up on the low speed. But like I said, this is not none of this is for the AC. This is only, it just pulls up. There's a fuse in here. The rest of the stuff is for the main, what gives the main fuse box of the car. So that's you know, you got your fuel pump, stuff like that, and then ignition switch. This all ties into, this would have been the engine bay fuse box, and then the other relays are all hidden, you know, in different places in the car, in the side panel, etc. This is actually a fuel pump relay, and then this, I added these two to trigger the condenser from the factory switch, and to trigger the fan for the condenser. I'm moving into the car. It looks like crap now because it's disassembled, but you know, everything works actually like stock does. So you turn on the AC and you hit that AC, you turn on the fan and you hit that AC button, and then it'll work. It'll turn on the air conditioning. And then you see now it's all missing. You know, the evaporator core inside here I have it all out. I had to take it out because it was, you know, a mess in there. But this is for the Vh45 swap stuff, and this is the Dakota fan controller. I have all this actually bolts in there real nice and clean. I just had to remove all of this stuff to get this out of here. So this is going to be, and I'll get it. I'm just trying to get this all set up tomorrow. Like I said, this uses the factory, as much of the factory stuff as possible. There's actually a factory dash harness in there now. The fuse box is back in the kick panel and the driver's side, and then all the custom stuff I have, like all of this stuff and that stuff, you see everything's labeled. It all ties in to the factory harness. It took me a long time to depin that whole factory harness and shorten everything and get it to work again, stock with all the stuff I have. But like I said, we'll try to get this running in the next few days and see, yeah, this actually works. I think it's going to work pretty well, actually. I mean, from what I've seen so far, it was cooling really nicely. But yeah, that's the electric air compressor. And it's actually very quiet. So you can barely hear this thing run. It's brushless. It's got a controller in here. So I think this is going to work pretty well. We'll see. Alright guys, I'll have an update soon.